So thing number one, we're just gonna have to ignore the fact that I'm in a dress. I know it doesn't support my point. It's irrelevant here. It's a coincidence. I happen to be wearing a dress today. We'll get into that later. I'm trans. I know what you're thinking. You're confused. That's okay. I was confused too. You're thinking, are you trans femme? The answer is no. I'm trans masc. Ignore the dress. We'll get into that later. Second thing, there are construction workers across the street and my windows are wide open for the light. So while I'm filming this, I'm also making eye contact with some construction workers right now. Hello, sir. I shouldn't wave because they'll know that I'm looking at them. Okay, I'm a millennial. I grew up in the 90s. We didn't really have a lot of trans media at the time. And if we did, it was sensational shit. And also, I was Catholic, so I didn't grow up with these ideas. I will tell you, I've been a tomboy my entire life. Puberty was an extremely difficult experience for me. That's because I was trans the whole time. I did not know. I thought that trans meant you were a boy at birth, and then later you realize you're a girl, and so you transition into being a girl. Whether or not you have like medical transitions or medically supported transitions, if you have surgeries or whatever, you don't have to, but you are assigned a boy and you become a girl. That's one way. Or you are assigned a girl and you become a boy. You transition into looking like a boy. Since then, I have found out through actually my partner, who has a ton of trans femme friends mostly, from Tumblr. My partner's been on Tumblr for like 15 years. They were always looking at me askance because my experiences that I would talk to my partner about over the years aligned very, very specifically and very closely with the experience of their trans femme friends. So the person who cracked my egg, if you will, which is a term that I've since found out means you're an egg before you realize you're trans. You're always trans, but you're an egg before you realize you're trans, and then the egg cracks and you become a trans person who knows that they're trans. That's what happened to me. The person who cracked my egg was my partner, because I said something about it slowly over the years was like, yeah, of course I'd love to be a boy. Everybody wants to be a boy. Yeah, of course I don't know how to be a girl. I'm just a funny type of girl. Yeah, of course, growing up, puberty was really hard for me. Puberty is a traumatizing experience for everybody. Of course, I wish that I could have been a boy and all of my friends were boys growing up. I'm just a boy type of girl. I'm just a tomboy. I'm just a tough girl. I'm just a girl who likes boy shit. That's just normal. My partner was the one who was like, and if you could have been trans, would you have been trans? And I went, of course. It's just that it was too late, because by the time that all of these kids were finding out that they were trans, I was in my 30s. How am I supposed to be trans? There's no way. But if I was born now, or if I was born 10 years ago, I would be trans now. And that's the point where I was like, that means I'm trans, doesn't it? So what I didn't know is that trans means anything that's not cis. I learned from another trans friend that there's a term called cisint, as in cisint, as in not cis. And that is under the trans umbrella. So growing up in Catholic school, there was also this binary idea of what sexuality was. You were straight, gay, or bisexual. Straight on this side, gay on this side, or bisexual right in the middle. And those are the three sexualities you can have. Later on, I learned about pansexual, which meant the entire spectrum. What I didn't understand is that way later I would identify as queer, meaning not along a spectrum at all, but rather a cloud of identities, a cloud of sexualities, a cloud of intersectional identities, a cloud of different ways of being a person that doesn't adhere to a binary system, straight, gay, or in between. It's not a line like that. It's like all over the place. This, straight, gay, and in between, are just 3 points in an enormous cloud of infinite possibilities. I used to think that that was a ridiculous way to think. But now I see that that's just that's societally we're conditioned and taught to think about sexuality as a flat graph. It's like if you're in the first dimension. You can't see outside of the first dimension. You can't see a square if you live in a world of lines. So once the square was opened up to me, it felt like, shit, my sexuality makes sense now, because it's not that I'm attracted to just women or just men. I'm attracted to anybody of any gender. And I didn't yet understand gender, which would be, in this analogy, the third dimension. That's when things start to get depth, width, and height. Shit's crazy. You can be over here. You could also be over here. Both of those identities are valid and human. Do you understand what I'm saying? I'm trans because I'm not cis. I'm trans masc because I'm not non-binary. I grew up wanting to be a boy. And I used to think I grew up wanting to be a boy. Now I know I grew up a boy. I was a little boy. If you look at pictures of me from the time that I was allowed to dress myself, you'd be like, yeah, that's a little boy. And if you looked at videos of me from the time that I was allowed to dress myself, and even earlier than that, from preschool, you'd be like, that's a little fucking boy. I told my partner, if I had been allowed to take blockers and medically transition into a boy, I would have fucking done that. And I never knew that growing up. So the dress, so the makeup, so the hairstyle, that's my outward gender expression. But you can tell, because you done been here. If you've been here if you've watched this video until now, my mannerisms, you can tell I'm trans masked. You could just tell I'm a dude. And my partner explained to me this theory that was explained to them by a different trans person. And of course, this is reductionist and this is adhering back to the binary, but it's a way to make cis people understand what it's like to be trans, to give them some idea of what it's like to be trans. You can be born a boy or a girl and then grow up to be a woman or a man. And you can be a boy who grows up to be a woman. And you can be a girl who grows up to be a man. I was a boy who grew up to be a woman. Entirely that. And you can feel that when you look at me. I know you can. I know you know I'm trans. And when I tell you, being trans is the best thing to ever happen to me, because suddenly all of the problems that I've ever had in my entire life, not all of them, that's an exaggeration, but the serious lifelong problems that I've struggled with in mental health, in body image, and like traumas, sorry for using quotations, trauma is real, but like in traumas that I've held in my heart and in my head for my entire life, I thought those had wide and disparate origins. I thought that I had an eating disorder because of trauma from my family life growing up. I'm not going to get into it. I love my family now. But I thought that that's where my eating disorder came from perfectionism, from anxiety disorders that run in my family all the way back through my grandma and before. You know, ancestral trauma, being colonized people, you understand. I thought that that's where my eating disorder came from. And while those things did contribute, most of it is because I'm trans. And my eating disorder started when I was 4 years old, when I looked down and went, I don't like this body. And then it really progressed in puberty because I didn't want boobs so bad. And you'll notice, not to be vulgar, but I'm a T-boy. So, hey, these are what my boobs look like. I have stretch marks on them. That's because I prayed to God. Remember, I was a Catholic. I prayed to God every day for years, from the time that I was about 11, that I knew puberty was coming, all the way until my boobs finally came in. I prayed that they just wouldn't come in. I just didn't fucking want them. And so it took all the way up until the summer before my junior year of high school, I was 15 years old, for my boobs to start growing. And then they came in all at once. My body went, girl, we can't hold this off anymore. But with the power of my mind, I fully believe that with the power of my mind, I held off puberty that would turn me into a woman for as long as I could. You know what? If I can find pictures of me in the 7th and 8th grade pre-puberty, I will insert them here. But all of the girl games, like the middle school girl games, like the social games that I was supposed to be privy to, were very traumatizing for me as a child because I was trans masked and I was expected to play these social games of like whose friend is who and we're gonna bully you by being passive aggressive to you. And I've said for years, there were attempts to bully me consistently throughout school because I was very strange trans. I was very strange and very didn't fit what the other girls were doing. I didn't want to wear their school skirt. I wore the boy uniform. I wore skate shoes to school. I like knockoff skate shoes from Ross. I went to Catholic school and I had a uniform, but I would personalize everywhere that I could. So I avoided makeup. I avoided hygiene. I avoided the girls' uniform. I avoided anything that would mark me as feminine for as long as I possibly could. And because of that, I was bullied. But I didn't understand that I was being bullied because I did not understand the social games. So I ran into that shit like a little boy. And if girls were making fun of me, I'd be like, fuck yeah, that's funny. And they didn't know how to deal with me. I didn't actually start learning the rules of being a woman until I was 14 years old. And a boy bullied me in school, and I started to have crushes on boys. Because while I do identify as a queer person and a transmasc person, I am attracted to men. I'm also attracted to women and people of all genders. But at this time, in Catholic school, the only one that I could recognize as real attraction was attraction to men. Now, I did find out later, all of my obsessions with girls in school were crushes. I didn't know. I thought I just really want to be her friend and be around her all the time and smell her. Not in a creepy way, in a kid crush way. I just want to be around her and hold her hand as best friends. That's a crush. By the way, if you're watching this and you're a kid and you feel those ways, that's a crush. You're probably gay. It's okay. Being gay is great. But anyways, I wore a uniform all throughout kindergarten all the way through 8th grade. Now I was in high school where the uniform was a much looser suggestion. So I wore the same shit to school every single day. I wore a green jacket, a polo shirt, and brown corduroy pants. And I wore a sweatband of Stewie Griffin that I got from Hot Topic. And one day, a boy who was like kind of cute in my Japanese class leaned over to me and went, "Do you ever wash your clothes?" He was teasing me. He was bullying me. I had enough social awareness to know that 1, this boy is cute. 2, he's making fun of me. 3, that means I'm unattractive. So 4, I should do something about it. That was the impetus for me learning the rules of what it meant to be a girl. I was never, ever good at it. I did not perfect the rules of being a girl until years later when I was 23 and I on purpose, willingly, went through a femme phase of my life because I wanted to integrate femininity into my life. It was something that I'd always been afraid of, never wanted to deal with, always felt really at odds with. But when I turned 23, I went, I'm gonna fucking do it. Cut my hair, learn to do makeup, starved myself, and then wore sexy clothes, which was something that always made me feel incredibly dysphoric. I hated the idea of being sexy. At this time, I thought it was internalized misogyny and Catholic trauma. And while those things were part of it, most of it was because I was trans. So I did those things on purpose and found out that it gave me a lot of power because I have pretty privilege as a dude. Which, like, it's fine. It's cool. I get a lot of shit for being pretty and have gotten a lot of shit for being pretty. That's a whole nother issue. We'll talk about that a whole nother time. But what ended up happening is I learned that being pretty could get me things. The first time I learned this, by the way, was the first time I starved myself. Seriously. Oh, that's dark. Trigger warning. I started starving myself for real when I was 17, and that was a whole lot of home issues, plus being away from home for the first time where nobody was looking at me, plus being trans and knowing that I wasn't the right kind of woman, but thinking that if I could just get skinny enough, then somebody would love me and I would be deserving of love. And if I was deserving of love, it would validate my existence as a human being. Those, I now realize, are common feelings for trans people to have. It's incredibly common, I'll look up the statistic, but it's incredibly common for both trans femme and transmasc and non-binary people to have eating disorders. I have friends who have come out as trans around the same timeline as me, and those people have also struggled with eating disorders. I started recovery when I was 19 and didn't actually recover fully until last year when I found out I was trans. So when I tell you being trans is the best thing that ever happened to me, eating disorder, poof, gone. Because now I know when I look in the mirror, if I feel dysmorphia, if I feel like I'm fat, I use quotation marks here because we all know being fat is great and beautiful and fat people are sexy and cool and smart, whatever. You get what I'm saying. Being fat is not a bad thing. Being fat, the way that eating disorders make you think, the eating disorder makes you think, at least mine did, that if you're fat, it means you are unlovable. It means that you are unworthy of being respected as a human being. It means that nobody would ever love you because you are fat, which is not true. Those two things have nothing to do with each other. That's why I put air quotes around it. Fat is a made-up thing that eating disorders teach you. It gives you agency because whatever problems that you feel about yourself, if your brain can attach it to being fat, if your brain can attach it to the size of your body, then that's actionable. You can stop eating and then become smaller, and then your brain tells you that all your problems will go away. That's what was happening to me at this time. But I've learned since that for a lot of trans people, once you learn you're trans, your eating disorder becomes a lot more manageable. Because for me, when I look in the mirror and I feel dysmorphic, as in I can't tell what my body looks like, I feel fat that day. It's actually dysphoria. It's gender dysphoria. It's not that I feel fat, it's that I feel femme, and not in a good way. Today I'm femme and I'm feeling it, because as you can see, I'm femme, but I'm still masc. I have an energy to me that is between both things. And so I can dress like this and be confident in myself that my body looks good, that I look good, that I am cool, that I am still tough, that I still am strong, and I like myself. And so I can be femme comfortably. And when other people look at me and see me, perceive me as femme, it doesn't affect me because I know who I am. I girl mode all the time. We'll get into that again later. But some days I wake up and I feel like I look femme and nobody can actually know that I'm not. And if I go outside and people see me, they're going to think I'm a girl in a way that is very painful for me. That's complicated to explain, but I think you understand what I mean. For me to look femme out of my own agency is cool. That's gender. That's what the kids say. That's gender. That's cool. I'm good with that. If you think I'm femme on a day where I'm like, yeah, I'm femme, then we have consent. But if I go outside on a day where I feel like you will think I'm femme, and I don't feel that way about myself, that can be extremely upsetting. That's dysphoria, as I experience it. On those days, that's what my brain used to tell me were fat days. You can't wake up one day fat and wake up the next day and feel confident and slim. That makes no logical sense, but that's what my brain always used to tell me. Now I know that's because some days I wake up and my gender fits my expression and my attitude for the day, and some days I wake up and I feel dysphoric. Some days I wake up and I just wish people could see me the way that I am to me. I wish that walking down the street, people could see me and go, that's a dude in a dress. On those days where I feel that disparate existence, where I'm walking around in the world knowing who I am and knowing that you can't see that the average person on the street will just see me as a woman, those are very painful days. My brain used to tell me to starve myself on those days. Now I know, wear a big shirt, wear big pants, butch it up, try and look cool, and tomorrow will be better. So, eating disorder, fucking dealt with. That in itself is something that was so hard for me from the time that I was 4 years old until 29. It's 25 years of me waking up and starving myself because I didn't feel good. Can you believe that? And I didn't want to be doing that shit. I wanted to feel good about myself to the point where I started recovery 10 years ago. And then learning that I was trans just kicked that. My mental health is so much better. So let's get into girl moding. You see I'm wearing a dress. I talked a little bit about gender expression and about how sometimes when I'm walking down the street, I'm masked enough in my head to look like this, present like this, and know that you'll feel something queer about me. And I know this happens because straight girls want me everywhere I go. And that's not me bragging, though if you are a man watching this and you're a straight man, I could take your girlfriend. I'm just kidding. I'm not kidding though, but I am just kidding. Levity, humor, it's important when you're queer. Oddly, about a year and a half ago, before I knew I was trans at all, I just asked my mom and dad, out of nowhere, I went, if I was non-binary, would you be surprised? I just wanted to know. That's such eggy behavior. That's egg shit to ask your family without thinking that you're trans, if they'd be surprised if you were trans. That's some subconscious egg shit. But I did ask them that, and my dad said, God bless them, my dad said, yes, I'd be surprised, because you're married. God bless. My dad, growing up, very homophobic, very anti-trans and all that shit. But as he's gotten older, he's become a much better person. And something that you have to understand, my dad, don't fucking judge my dad. Something you have to understand about him is he became a dad when he was 18. So he didn't go to school. He had pretty absent parents. My grandparents are awesome. I love them. They raised me. And all my aunts and uncles who were also parents to me and raised me too. But this is when we talk about generational trauma and intersectionality and what it's like to be a colonized person who grew up Filipino Catholic with self-hatred for the culture because the Spaniards colonized the Filipinos. It gets into all. This is intersectionality and queerness. And and how that affects future generations, and how colonization and westernization affects indigenous people. Do you see what I'm saying? So what the results of that was that my dad, when he became a dad himself very young, didn't go to school, he wasn't educated on queerness. And so in his 50s, he started to learn about transgender people. I remember when he learned about Jazz, the little transgender girl, and he told my older brother, who was also grew up around the same time and also was homophobic and transphobic. I remember my dad telling my brother in the living room, "You can't tell me that's not a little girl. Look at her, you can't tell me that's not a little girl." And from that point on, my dad changed his ideas on what it means to be transgender. And it just kind of evaporated off of him, the transphobia and the homophobia. Of course, there's internalized shit from being like 60 years old and having grown up in a society that is intentionally homophobic, misogynistic, and transphobic, and patriarchal, right? Those things together create this whole picture that we're now healing from generationally because of so many things, and because of the hard work of trans black women primarily, and queer black women primarily. But you guys get what I'm saying. You know this. You're smart. You read books. You know. Anyways. So I asked my mom and dad, would they be surprised? They both said yes. They're learning. I plan on coming out to my mom as trans. I think she'll know. I actually, because I live out, I don't come out. I just, when I discover something about myself, I just go, I will now just bring girlfriends home. I'm bisexual now, I'll just bring girlfriends around. I'm trans now, I will just dress like a boy when I feel like dressing like a boy. I'm not ever hiding it. I don't go in the closet. Once I know that I've been in the closet because I didn't know about myself, then I'm out that day. And I don't necessarily tell people because I don't want the judgment. I just want to live my life, and you can look at me and judge me, but we're not going to have a conversation about it. I'm not going to give you an opportunity to say no to me about who I am. So I just live out. That's what I mean. Of course, I am extremely privileged in order to be able to do that because I do have a family who has grown out of homophobia and transphobia. I did grow up in San Francisco where there was tons of queer people around me, even though I went to Catholic school. I have been very privileged to grow up with family and friends who love and support me. That's unique to my situation, and I don't take that for granted a day in my life. I am extremely privileged to have been able to marry a person who understands me and supports me and wants me to figure out who I am and be the best person that I can be. Because of those things, because of my privilege in that area, I can talk to you now and explain my experiences as a person who is just now learning what it means to be transgender. As a person who's just now learning what it means to be me, I can tell you how great it is and how happy I am and how this idea of queerness being deviant or bad or away from norm is bullshit. Because I guarantee you know at least 3 trans people. I guarantee you know at least 3 trans people in your life. You've met, hung out with, been acquaintances with, bought a coffee from, had a teacher who's trans. At least 3. Because we're fucking everywhere, that's why. And we've always been here. Being trans is the very best thing that's ever happened to me. Like I said, other things that it cleared up for me, I didn't like my mom when I was growing up. Now that's crazy because if you know my mom, you know I have one of the best moms in the entire world. Once I became an adult, my mom started talking to me about spirituality and growing up to trust yourself and be yourself above all things. And so that's another reason why I'm going to come out to my mom as trans. And she's going to be really happy for me. I know she will. She loves me. But I didn't like her growing up. And I felt so much guilt for that when I grew into adulthood. Because I felt like my mom was trying so hard. And my mom, God bless my dad, but at the time, my parents had been young parents. And they were in a very toxic, abusive relationship. And my mom was mostly the person suffering from abuse in her romantic relationship. And as an adult, I felt so much guilt over not giving patience and love and understanding to a woman who was going through a lot of emotional abuse in her home. Why did I not care more for my mother? Why did I reject her so vehemently all the time? I felt so much guilt over the fact that I didn't like my mom and I just wanted to be like my dad. And I felt like I have so much internalized misogyny and so much internalized patriarchy that I would elevate my dad over my mom, when my mom is the one, as a woman, that I should be identifying with and trying to learn from. And I just felt so bad that all I wanted to do was be a man like my dad. And when I learned I was trans, that guilt went away. Because of course I wanted my dad to recognize me as a boy. I was a boy. I begged my dad to take me fishing. My dad was a fisherman. Begged my dad to take me fishing. He said I was too small. Every year for 10 years. And he took my little brother. And my little brother was smaller than me. And that year I asked my dad, Dad, you said that you would take me fishing. Why didn't you ever take me? You took my brother. My dad said, you will never be big enough. You will always be too small to go fishing with me. That was pain like no other, because I was a boy and I wanted to be like him. And I'm not blaming my dad. He didn't know. How was he supposed to know? To him, I was his very sweet little daddy's girl, right? That's a trope that we know very well. How could he recognize that I was trans when he didn't know what trans was? He just thought I loved him because I was a daddy's girl. I was not. I was a son who wanted to be like my dad, who idolized my dad, right? That's normal. That's a normal course of development, at least in a heteropatriarchal society. So, the way that I wanted my dad to teach me how to throw a baseball, to teach me how to ride a bike, and to teach me how to go fishing. And when I say I've been extremely lucky to have love and support in my life, the people who taught me how to throw a baseball were my boy cousins. The people who taught me how to ride a bike were all of my cousins, boy and girl. I was 12 years old. I'd been waiting all my life for my dad to teach me how to ride a bike, and he never did. He's busy. Also, he didn't know how to interact with a kid who was a girl but was so clearly a boy. He liked that I loved him and idolized him, but he also didn't want me to grow up gay, because the way that he'd been taught, as if gay and gender are the same thing, but he thought that, and he was trying to protect me, because the way that he had been taught growing up was that if you're gay, you have a really hard life. Also, it's a sin. He was Catholic. So he just kind of held me at arm's length as I grew up. Reasonable thing to do if you're a dad who loves your kid and you're Catholic and you have internalized trauma from heteropatriarchal society. I understand. I totally understand. So I didn't learn how to throw a baseball until my cousin Justin took me into the backyard and taught me how to throw a baseball. And I didn't learn how to ride a bike until all of my cousins said, Gabby, it's time for you to learn. Stop waiting for your dad. And I had 3 on this side of the handlebars, 3 on this side of the handlebars. And this is a memory I'll never forget. It was sunset in a cul-de-sac where my cousins lived. They pushed me on that bike all the way down the street. And then all of them let go at the same time. They went 3, 2, 1, let go. They were running. And all of a sudden I was all on my own. And I was flying. And it was great. And I'm glad it happened that way. Because, as I said, I couldn't have that support from my dad because he didn't know, but I did have that support from everybody else. And when I did start dressing like a boy, after being in that relationship that I told you about that was abusive, where the partner tried to make me conform to traditional femininity, have me be a housewife, because that's what he wanted out of me. It was a very heteronormative relationship. He wanted me to be something that I could never be, and I really wanted him to love me because I didn't know what it felt like to be loved properly. And I thought that I would get it from men, because that's what I learned in society, that once you have romantic heterosexual love, everything gets fixed. Somebody loves you, and now you're worth something. I bent over backwards. I wasn't mature enough to take care of myself effectively. I hadn't been given the opportunity to learn yet. I was in this relationship from the time that I was 21 until I was 24. So I was untested. I didn't know. This was a big test for me, and I did learn it. But I bent over backwards, adhering to this person's expectations, because I wanted the love so bad that I was willing to force myself into the gender binary and occupy this tiny space that he was making for me in order to accept his love. That felt like a fair and sustainable transaction for me at the time. Of course, it wasn't. So after 2 years in a relationship where every day I would paint my face in girl mode, grow my hair, and yes sir, this man, this big ass man, because I thought that it would make me happy, and I thought that it would give me what I needed in life. I thought that I'd be taken care of and loved appropriately, the way that I'd been promised. After 2 years of that, I ended up Suddenly, shaving my head and dressing extremely masked. There was nothing that I could do. It's like a rubber band getting pulled with so much tension until finally it snaps. It snapped. And I wanted to call myself Gabriel. I also didn't know I was trans at this time. I wanted to call myself Gabriel. I wanted everybody to refer to me as my brother's brother. I went full mask all the way to the farthest. I wore my brother's clothes. I wore my dad's clothes. I wore their jewelry. And I walked around every day with my hair short, trying to look like a man. That's what I wanted. Of course, I got broken up with because that partner went, "I think you're a lesbian." As if gender and sexuality are the same thing. So that summer, I was lucky enough. When I say that I didn't necessarily have the support that I needed, it came from everywhere else. Because my brother and my dad both lent me their clothes. My dad helped me shave my head. I was allowed to wear anything in the house that I wanted to. I didn't have to wear my clothes or girls' clothes. Girls' clothes. And I know now that that's a really unique and special experience that I had. I am so lucky. And so because I was that lucky, I'm able to say that being trans is the best thing that ever happened to me. Because it is. Because it's only made my life better. Because all of a sudden, now that internalized misogyny and patriarchy and all of those things that made me feel so guilty, that I thought I want to be a man because I hate women, I know now that it's not true. That I wanted to be a man because I was a boy. And I had to learn the rules of being a woman. And learning the rules of being a woman, while it was very painful, it was extremely painful to have to present as a woman. I did learn that it got me a lot of shit. And now I'll talk about all of my friends growing up had always been boys. And I looked like this. I'm pretty. Whatever. Good for me. It gets you a lot in life. I am not discounting pretty privilege. But as a trans person, being pretty is cool. I would prefer it to not being pretty. Of course, it's a privilege. But it can be very difficult because it leads to a lot of dysphoria. Don't look at me like that because people will be like, "Oh, you're complaining about being pretty." But yeah, I fucking am, because it leads to a lot of dysphoria. Because that first time that I starved myself that I talked about earlier, all of a sudden, men treated me so differently. They treated me like an object. And before, I had always been the obese, funny friend. And that was very comfortable for me because obese, funny friend is genderless. And that's a whole other thing that we can talk about. That could be a whole other video. But to be fat in the time that I was growing up, in the early 2000s to like late 2000s, to be fat was to be genderless, to be undesired. And of course, like, that's its whole thing, its whole other thing. But you guys know what I'm talking about. You remember that. Fat phobia was so real at that time and so rampant at that time, and it was kind of nice for me. And I think I did that to myself on purpose to avoid being seen in that way, especially as a person who was underage. I did not want, when my boobs came in, they came in huge, by the way, like huge, in a really painful way for me. Big boobs run in my family. Cool. I knew it was coming. It still hurt. I think that I subconsciously, and this is a whole other thing, I think that I on purpose made myself genderless, fat. And this is a hard thing to say because you know how we feel about fat bodies. But me at the time, having so much internalized fat phobia, I think that I on purpose tried to make myself fat so that people would not see me as attractive. But later, when the desire to be loved became so great that I was willing to starve myself in order to lose the protection, my theory about myself is that when the desire to be loved, the desire to get better, the desire to recover from an abusive home life that I had grown up in, that's all I had known, and the desire to acquire romantic love was so much greater than the desire to be seen as myself, as non-femme, that I was willing to starve myself in order to get the body that men would want, because I thought only men would like me, because I thought I was a woman, and I was confused about gender and sexuality, having grown up Catholic. I thought with all my heart that if I conformed my body to the standards that men liked, that I had been taught, skinny, big boobs, big butt, pretty, that I would then win, and I could be desirable, and I could finally have love. Which, you know, it comes from yourself and yourself only. That was a lesson that I would learn with time. But So I know we were just getting to the good part, but what happened was while I was filming, somebody came home, and I'm a very shy type of fellow when it comes to talking in front of other people. So I did turn off the camera, and I'm just gonna have to make a part 2 because I know we were getting to the really good part where I start to talk about trading sexuality and prettiness for access to a male space and how I was okay with that. We're gonna talk about that, and we'll talk all about how my life is now that I know I'm trans, and how much better it is, how much exponentially better it is in just 1 year, how the people who are closest to me treat me now that I am living out as trans, how my partners are just like the most accepting and cool people ever, and what it's like to be a person who girl modes, what girl moding is, and why I do it, and transition, and what transition was like for me, what that looked like, and we'll talk about all of that. It's an open conversation, and if you have questions, please ask me questions. And if you're a cis person and you made it all the way to the end of this video, thank you for watching, truly. Like, thanks. That's really cool, because back when I thought I was cis, I thought that I couldn't watch videos by trans people or couldn't engage with trans media because I just assumed that I wouldn't understand and that it wasn't media for me. It wasn't media that I was allowed to participate in because it was a community that I didn't see myself as being invited into. But I did used to go on Reddit and like look at trans memes because I had a really good trans friend, Maggie, who once posted a Reddit meme from the trans subreddit, and I thought it was really funny, so I went, let me just go on and peek, and that is eggy behavior. It is. So this is just my experience as one trans person. Happy Trans Day of Visibility. If you think that you might be trans, hey, maybe you are. Think about it. Explore. Watch some more videos. And if you're a cis person who's watching this, send this video to another cis person that you know. Share it with your family. And if you're a cis person and you made it all the way to the end of this video, thank you for watching. And also, send this video to another cis person that you know. Because I think that stories like mine are not really portrayed in media that much. I'm a trans masc person. Whether or not you or me like 5 years ago would have perceived me looking like this as a trans masc person is irrelevant. I am one. And my identity is totally valid and totally real. It's easy to show cis people images of people who grew from boy to woman or girl to man. And these people's gender expressions reflect cis people's ideas of what people should look like, of what a gender binary looks like. But there are so many people who identify as non-binary and also who don't, like me. I don't identify as non-binary. There are tons of trans people who are not one thing or the other thing, who are not in this very specific set of rules that we think, or that I thought, and that a lot of cis people think are what it means to be trans. If you're a cis person and you're watching this, talk to another cis person about it. Or look for other trans narratives, aside from the ones that we are constantly shown in media. Look for what it looks like to be two-spirit, or mahu, or what indigeneity and transness looks like. Just look for the sections of intersectionality that people like me and all the other trans people who exist in the world exist within. Look at that. Because it's really interesting, it's really cool, it's really fun, and it's a way of getting to know the people around you in a really loving and exciting way. Other human beings' experiences are very fun to learn about, don't you think? Don't you think it's fun to learn about other people? So anyways, thanks for listening to a portion of my story. I am very willing to talk more about what it's like to be me. So if you have any specific questions that you want to know, ask me whatever you want. I'm willing to talk about it. If you have questions, ask them below. I will do my best to answer them in a subsequent video. So thank you for watching. Happy Trans Day of Visibility. And if you're trans and you're watching this, go us, yeah? Go us. Okay, thank you. Thanks for being here. I'll see you again.